The phone call that would destroy the most powerful alliance in conservative politics came at 3:47 a.m. on October 14th, 2025. Donald Trump had been unable to sleep, his mind racing with rage over what he had just discovered about the woman he had trusted more than anyone else in his political movement. Marjorie Taylor Greene, his most ferocious defender, his attack dog in Congress, his chosen warrior against the establishment, had been secretly building her own empire within MAGA, systematically stealing his donors, recruiting his staff, and preparing to launch the most audacious coup in political history. For 3 years, Greene had played the perfect loyalist while quietly positioning herself to replace Trump as the leader of his own movement. But Trump had finally uncovered her treachery, and his fury was about to unleash a civil war that would tear the Republican Party apart from the inside. What started as a furious midnight phone call would explode into the most vicious political battle in modern American history, with Trump declaring total war on the woman who had dared to betray the king of MAGA. And when all hell broke loose, both their careers would be destroyed in the wreckage of their spectacular mutual annihilation. The relationship between Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene had always been built on mutual exploitation disguised as loyalty. Trump needed Greene's unfiltered aggression and her ability to say things that even he couldn't get away with, while Greene needed Trump's endorsement to transform herself from a QAnon-adjacent conspiracy theorist into one of the most powerful figures in American conservative politics. Their alliance had been forged in the crucible of the 2020 election aftermath, when most Republican politicians were quietly distancing themselves from Trump's most extreme claims about voting machines and stolen elections. Greene had distinguished herself by not only embracing these theories, but amplifying them with a passion that impressed even Trump's most devoted supporters. The former president had recognized Greene's value immediately. Here was someone who could attack his enemies with a viciousness that made his own tweets seem measured by comparison. She could spread conspiracy theories that he could later validate without taking the initial risk. She could serve as his proxy in congressional battles while maintaining plausible deniability for his involvement. For Greene, the alliance had been transformational. Before Trump's endorsement, she had been a wealthy gym owner from Georgia with extreme political views and a social media presence that attracted more ridicule than respect. With Trump's backing, she had become a fundraising juggernaut, a media sensation, and one of the most recognizable faces in Republican politics. But by early 2025, the dynamics of their relationship had begun shifting in ways that neither of them fully understood. Trump's legal troubles were mounting, his electoral prospects were uncertain, and his grip on the Republican Party was showing signs of weakness for the first time since 2016. Greene, meanwhile, had been quietly building an independent political operation that rivaled Trump's own organization in sophistication and scope. What had started as a simple congressional office had evolved into a multi-million-dollar political machine with its own fundraising network, media operation, and database of loyal supporters. The transformation had been gradual and carefully concealed. Greene continued to play the role of Trump's most devoted follower in public, defending his every statement and attacking his enemies with characteristic ferocity. But behind the scenes, she had been systematically building the infrastructure necessary to replace him as the leader of the MAGA movement. The plan that Greene had been developing was breathtaking in its ambition and devastating in its betrayal of everything Trump thought their relationship represented. She intended to use her position as Trump's most trusted ally to gradually transition MAGA loyalty from him to her, presenting herself as the natural evolution of the movement rather than a challenger to its founder. Greene's strategy was based on a simple but explosive premise. Trump was becoming a liability to the conservative cause, and she was the only person positioned to carry forward his message without his baggage. She would present herself as Trump 2.0, all of his populist appeal and fighting spirit, but without the legal troubles, electoral defeats, and advancing age that were making him increasingly vulnerable. The operation that Greene had been running was called Project Phoenix, a reference to the mythical bird that rises from ashes. Her inner circle believed that Trump's political career was effectively over, and that Greene could emerge from his destruction as the reborn leader of American conservatism. Project Phoenix had three distinct phases: consolidation, separation, and conquest. The consolidation phase involved strengthening Greene's independent political infrastructure while maintaining the appearance of absolute loyalty to Trump. This phase had been largely completed by mid-2025, with Greene having secured independent funding streams, built extensive voter databases, and established relationships with key influencers throughout conservative media. The separation phase would involve gradually creating ideological and strategic distance between Greene and Trump, positioning her as the more principled and effective leader while maintaining enough association to retain his supporters' loyalty. This would be accomplished through carefully orchestrated disagreements on secondary issues and strategic positioning on key conservative priorities. The conquest phase would be the final betrayal, an open challenge to Trump's leadership that would force Republican voters to choose between the aging former president and his dynamic successor. Greene's team believed she could win such a contest by presenting herself as the future of conservatism while painting Trump as a relic of the past. The plan was sophisticated, well-funded, and might have succeeded if Trump hadn't discovered it at exactly the wrong moment. October 14th had started as a routine day for Trump at Mar-a-Lago, with a series of meetings about fundraising strategies and candidate endorsements for the 2026 midterm elections. But everything changed when Jason Miller, one of Trump's longest-serving advisors, requested an urgent private meeting that evening. Miller had received a devastating intelligence report from Marcus Webb, a former Trump campaign operative who had been working as a consultant for Greene's Political Action Committee while secretly documenting her activities. Webb had been providing information to Trump's inner circle for months, but his latest report contained evidence so explosive that Miller knew it would send Trump into a rage unlike anything they had witnessed before. The evidence Webb had compiled painted a picture of systematic betrayal that went far beyond normal political ambition. Greene hadn't just been building her own operation. She had been actively undermining Trump's political prospects while positioning herself to benefit from his downfall. The most damaging evidence consisted of recorded conversations from Greene's private strategy meetings, where she and her top advisors had discussed specific plans for transitioning MAGA loyalty away from Trump. In one particularly devastating recording, Greene could be heard saying, "Donald served his purpose, but movements evolve. The base wants his message, but they're tired of his drama. When the time comes, they'll follow strength, not sentiment." Even more damaging were financial records showing that Greene's PAC had been secretly polling in early primary states, testing her viability against Trump in a hypothetical 2028 Republican primary. The polling showed surprisingly competitive results, with Greene within striking distance of Trump among voters who identified as very conservative. But the evidence that sent Trump into his ultimate rage was a series of text messages between Greene and several major Republican donors, where she had explicitly discussed plans to transition the movement beyond Trump and had requested funding for what she called post-Trump MAGA leadership development. In one text exchange with billionaire conservative donor Harrison Clark, Greene had written, "The king is dead. He just doesn't know it yet. We need to prepare for the succession before the party tears itself apart." Clark had responded, "What timeline are you thinking for making this transition public?" Greene's reply was the smoking gun that would destroy their alliance forever after the midterms. "Give him one more election cycle to prove he's finished, then we move. The base will be ready for new leadership by then." When Miller finished presenting the evidence to Trump that evening, the former president sat in stunned silence for nearly 5 minutes. The betrayal was so complete, so calculating, so personally devastating that Trump seemed unable to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. "She's been planning this for how long?" Trump finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "At least 18 months, based on the earliest documents Webb could access," Miller replied. "Maybe longer." The silence that followed was ominous. Trump's advisors had seen him angry countless times before, but this was different. This was the cold, calculating fury of someone who had been personally betrayed by someone he had trusted completely. When Trump finally spoke again, His voice carried a menace that chilled everyone in the room. Give me every piece of evidence Webb has compiled. Every recording, every document, every text message. Then get Marjorie on the phone. It's time to end this. The phone call that would destroy the most powerful alliance in conservative politics took place at 3:47 a.m., with Trump dialing Greene's personal cell phone from his private office at Mar-a-Lago. Greene answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but instantly alert when she recognized the caller. "Donald? Is everything okay? It's almost 4 a.m." Trump's response was delivered with the cold precision of someone who had spent hours planning exactly what he was going to say. "Everything is not okay, Marjorie. In fact, everything is very, very bad. We need to talk about Project Phoenix." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Greene had believed her operation was completely secure, but hearing Trump use the code name for her secret project told her that her carefully constructed plans had been completely compromised. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Trump's laugh was bitter and cruel. "You don't know what I'm talking about? Then let me refresh your memory. Let me tell you about your secret polling in Iowa and New Hampshire. Let me tell you about your meetings with my donors where you discussed my political obituary. Let me tell you about your plan to steal my movement and stab me in the back." Greene tried to interrupt, but Trump wasn't finished. "I have recordings, Marjorie. I have text messages. I have financial records. I have everything. Your little coup attempt is over before it started, and now you're going to pay the price for betraying me." The conversation that followed was one of the most vicious political confrontations in modern American history. Trump systematically destroyed Greene with evidence of her treachery, while she desperately tried to explain away her actions or claim they had been misunderstood. "Donald, you have to understand, I was just building contingency plans. The party needs to be prepared for every scenario." "Contingency plans?" Trump's voice rose to a roar. "You were planning my political funeral while smiling to my face. You were stealing my donors while claiming to be my most loyal supporter. You're nothing but a two-faced traitor who forgot that I made your entire career." Greene made one desperate attempt to salvage the relationship. "Donald, please, we can work this out. We're on the same team. We want the same things for America." Trump's response was final and devastating. "There is no team anymore. Marjorie, there is no relationship. There is no working this out. You declared war on me the moment you started plotting behind my back. Well, congratulations, you got your war. But I'm going to win it. And when I'm done with you, your political career will be so thoroughly destroyed that your own mother won't vote for you." The call ended with Trump hanging up on Greene, but his war against his former ally was just beginning. Within hours of the phone call, Trump had activated every element of his political machine to destroy Marjorie Taylor Greene's career. The speed and efficiency of his response demonstrated just how thoroughly he still controlled the Republican Party's infrastructure, despite years of electoral defeats and legal troubles. Trump's first move was to reach out directly to major conservative donors who had been supporting Greene's operation, providing them with evidence of her betrayal and demanding they redirect their contributions away from her. Several donors who had been secretly funding Project Phoenix immediately canceled their commitments, leaving Greene's operation facing a sudden financial crisis. Simultaneously, Trump began working his extensive network in conservative media to ensure that Greene would be cut off from the platforms that had made her famous. He called Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, and Mark Levin personally, providing them with evidence of Greene's treachery and making it clear that supporting her would be considered an act of disloyalty to him. The response from conservative media was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, Greene found that interview requests from friendly outlets had suddenly dried up, and several planned appearances were canceled without explanation. But Trump's most devastating move was his decision to go public with his declaration of war against Greene. Rather than handling the conflict privately, he chose to make Greene's betrayal a public spectacle that would serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider challenging his leadership. On October 15th, exactly one day after discovering Greene's treachery, Trump posted a series of Truth Social messages that sent shockwaves through the political world. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a fraud and a traitor who used my endorsement to build her career and then tried to stab me in the back. She's been secretly working to destroy me while pretending to be my biggest supporter. She's worse than the rhinos because at least they're honest about being my enemies. The post received over 800,000 likes and was shared across every conservative platform, ensuring that Greene's betrayal became the dominant story in conservative media. But Trump wasn't finished. His next post was even more damaging. I have proof that Marjorie has been secretly polling against me, meeting with MY donors to steal them, and building her own organization to replace me as the leader of MAGA. She thinks she can use my movement to destroy me, but she picked the wrong person to betray. Anyone who supports this disloyal fake is no friend of mine. The posts were followed by a series of leaked documents that provided specific evidence of Greene's planning. Financial records showing her PAC's polling expenses, text messages with donors discussing post-Trump leadership, and audio recordings of strategy meetings where Greene had discussed plans to succeed Trump as the leader of the conservative movement. The evidence was so comprehensive and so damaging that even Greene's most devoted supporters found it difficult to defend her actions. Conservative social media exploded with reactions to Trump's revelations. The hashtag #UnleashCivilWar began trending nationally within hours, as millions of Republican voters struggled to process the implosion of what had seemed like an unbreakable alliance. Many of Trump's supporters expressed shock and anger at Greene's betrayal, with some calling for her to be expelled from Congress entirely. Comments on conservative social media platforms reflected the depth of their feeling of betrayal. I can't believe MTG would do this to Trump after everything he did for her. She's dead to me. This is exactly why we can't trust politicians. Even the ones who seem most loyal are just looking out for themselves. Trump needs to destroy her completely. Make an example of what happens when you betray MAGA. But Greene also had defenders, particularly among conservatives who had grown tired of what they saw as Trump's divisive leadership style. These supporters argued that political competition was healthy and that Greene had every right to build her own political operation. Maybe it's time for new leadership in the conservative movement. Trump lost in 2020 and has too much baggage. MTG is a fighter who gets things done. She doesn't need Trump's permission to build her own political future. This sounds like Trump being paranoid and destroying anyone who might challenge him. The split in conservative opinion reflected deeper divisions within the Republican Party about Trump's continued leadership and the future direction of the movement. Greene attempted to respond to Trump's attacks through a series of her own social media posts and public statements, but her position was essentially hopeless. Having built her entire political brand around loyalty to Trump, she had no credible way to defend her secret planning without undermining her own credibility. Her first response was a classic political deflection that blamed fake news and deep state operatives for creating false evidence against her. The establishment is so threatened by the MAGA movement that they're willing to fabricate documents and create fake evidence to divide us. I have never been disloyal to President Trump or to our movement. This is a coordinated attack designed to weaken conservative leadership. But the defense fell flat when Trump released audio recordings of Greene's own voice discussing plans to replace him. The recordings were authenticated by multiple independent experts, making it impossible for Greene to claim they were fabricated. Her second attempt at damage control was even more desperate. In a hastily organized press conference outside the Capitol building, Greene tried to frame her planning as contingency preparations rather than active betrayal. Any responsible political leader makes contingency plans for different scenarios. I was simply ensuring that the conservative movement would be prepared for any eventuality. This has been twisted by my enemies into something it was never intended to be. The explanation was unconvincing even to her supporters. The evidence Trump had released showed clear intent to actively challenge his leadership, not simply prepare for contingencies. Greene's final attempt to save her career was a direct appeal to Trump himself, delivered through a televised interview with Newsmax host Greg Kelly. In the interview, she apologized for any misunderstandings and begged Trump to reconsider his declaration of war. President Trump, if you're watching this, I want you to know that you made my career possible, and I will always be grateful for that. If my actions have been misinterpreted, or if there have been misunderstandings about my intentions, I sincerely apologize. You are the leader of this movement, and I would never intentionally do anything to undermine that leadership. The apology was abject and humiliating, but it came far too late to change Trump's mind. His response, delivered through Truth Social an hour after the interview aired, was swift and merciless. Marjorie's pathetic apology doesn't change the facts. She was caught red-handed plotting against me, and now she's trying to crawl back when her coup attempt failed. Too late. She showed her true colors, and now she'll face the consequences. MAGA has no room for traitors. The public humiliation of Greene's failed apology marked the point of no return in their conflict. Any possibility of reconciliation was permanently destroyed, and the war between Trump and his former ally became total and absolute. As the conflict escalated, the broader implications for the Republican Party became increasingly clear. The Trump-Green war wasn't just a personal feud between two ambitious politicians. It was a battle for the soul of the conservative movement that would determine the future direction of American politics. Trump's declaration of war against Greene had exposed fundamental tensions within the Republican Party about leadership, loyalty, and the future of conservatism. Some Republicans rallied to Trump's defense, viewing Greene's betrayal as confirmation that the former president remained the indispensable leader of their movement. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, who had his own complicated relationship with Trump, issued a carefully worded statement that implicitly supported Trump while avoiding direct criticism of Greene. The conservative movement succeeds when we have strong, principled leadership and clear unity of purpose. Personal ambition should never come before the principles we're fighting to defend. Senator Ted Cruz was more direct in his support for Trump. Loyalty matters in politics. When someone builds your career and you repay them with betrayal, there should be consequences. But other Republicans used the conflict as an opportunity to call for new leadership within the party. Senator Susan Collins, a frequent Trump critic, suggested that the Greene incident demonstrated the need for less divisive leadership that can unite rather than divide conservatives. Several House Republicans who had been quietly critical of Trump's continued dominance of the party began speaking more openly about the need for generational change in conservative leadership. The split in Republican opinion reflected deeper questions about Trump's electability and political future. Polling conducted in the weeks following the Greene conflict showed Trump's approval ratings among Republicans dropping to their lowest levels since the January 6 Capitol riot, as some conservative voters began questioning whether his leadership style was becoming a liability for the movement. Meanwhile, Greene's political operation was collapsing with stunning speed. Major donors canceled their commitments. Staff members resigned to avoid association with her betrayal of Trump, and her media appearances became increasingly rare as friendly outlets distanced themselves from the controversy. Most devastating of all, potential primary challengers began emerging in her Georgia congressional district, with several candidates announcing campaigns built around restoring Trump-loyal representation to her seat. All of these challengers received Trump's immediate endorsement, along with promises of financial support from his extensive donor network. The speed with which Greene's political infrastructure crumbled demonstrated just how dependent she had been on Trump support, despite her attempts to build an independent operation. Without his endorsement and the access it provided to conservative donors and media platforms, she found herself politically isolated and financially vulnerable. 6 weeks after Trump's declaration of war, the political landscape had fundamentally shifted. Greene's approval ratings among Republican voters in her district had plummeted from 76% to 31%, making her one of the most vulnerable incumbents in the country. Her fundraising had virtually ceased, with her campaign raising less than $50,000 in October compared to over $500,000 in the same month the previous year. More significantly, the Greene incident had served as a powerful demonstration of Trump's continued control over the Republican Party. Despite years of electoral defeats and mounting legal troubles, He had proven that he could still destroy the career of any Republican who dared to cross him. The message was received loud and clear by other ambitious Republicans who might have been considering challenges to Trump's leadership. Several potential 2028 presidential candidates who had been quietly building their own organizations suddenly became much more circumspect about appearing disloyal to the former president. But Trump's victory over Greene came at a significant cost to his own political prospects. The vicious nature of their conflict had highlighted some of the most unappealing aspects of his leadership style, reinforcing perceptions that he was more interested in personal loyalty than effective governance. Polling conducted by independent organizations showed that while Trump had won the loyalty battle within the Republican Party, his overall approval ratings among general election voters had declined as moderate Republicans and independents were turned off by the spectacle of his war with Greene. The conflict also revealed the extent to which Trump's movement had become dependent on personal loyalty rather than ideological principles. The fact that Greene could build such a significant following within MAGA circles while secretly planning to betray its founder suggested that the movement's foundation was less solid than its leaders had believed. For Greene herself, the war with Trump had transformed her from one of the most powerful figures in conservative politics to a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition and betrayal. Her media appearances became increasingly rare. Her influence within the Republican Party evaporated, and her political future became increasingly uncertain. In a final interview with a small conservative podcast, Greene offered what amounted to a political obituary for her own career. "I learned the hard way that in politics, loyalty isn't just important, it's everything. I thought I could be strategic about building for the future while maintaining my support for President Trump. I was wrong. The movement he built is bigger than any individual politician, including me." It was the closest thing to an admission of guilt that Greene would ever provide, but came far too late to salvage her relationship with Trump or restore her standing within the conservative movement. The Trump-Greene war officially ended on December 1st, 2025, when Greene announced that she would not seek re-election to Congress in 2026. In a brief statement, she cited family considerations and new opportunities in the private sector. But everyone understood that her political career had been effectively ended by Trump's declaration of war. Trump's response to Greene's withdrawal was characteristically unsympathetic. Marjorie made her choice when she decided to betray the movement that made her career possible. Now she's facing the consequences of that choice. This is what happens to traitors in MAGA. The civil war within the conservative movement was over, but its effects would be felt for years to come. Trump had emerged victorious, but at the cost of exposing the personal and vindictive nature of his leadership style. Greene had been destroyed, but her attempted coup had revealed vulnerabilities in Trump's movement that other ambitious politicians would eventually exploit. The phone call that started as Trump's discovery of Greene's betrayal had ended with the complete destruction of one of the most powerful alliances in modern American politics. Both participants had paid a price for their conflict, but Trump's victory was complete and total. In the end, the Trump-Greene war served as a definitive answer to one of the most important questions in Republican politics. Could anyone successfully challenge Trump's leadership of the conservative movement? Marjorie Taylor Greene had tried and failed spectacularly. Her political career sacrificed on the altar of Trump's demand for absolute loyalty. The war was over, Trump had won, and the conservative movement remained his exclusive domain. The attempted coup by his most trusted lieutenant had been crushed so thoroughly that it would serve as a deterrent to future challenges for years to come. When all hell broke loose between Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene, only one of them survived the carnage. The king of MAGA had defended his throne, and the pretender to his crown had been utterly destroyed in the process.